Well, it's really nice to see you again, Naomi. Thank you so much for coming along. And we've got a coaching session today. So have you got a topic that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I do. And thanks, Charlie. Yeah. So I have just sort of embarking on a new direction in my career, setting up my own business. And part of that setting up business is having a social media presence. And I am an introvert naturally. I'm less comfortable with sharing about myself and what I do publicly. And I just want to have a few tools in my locker that will enable me to feel more comfortable with sharing online, because I have to do that as part of my business. I have to get to that place. I just want to feel like it's a little bit, yeah, more comfortable than it is at the moment.
Okay. So you said the word comfortable a couple of times. Just
Yeah.
just flesh that out a little bit. What do you mean about being comfortable?
So I wouldn't automatically share much about myself. And if I'm in a conversation with somebody, typically I would sort of ask them a lot about themselves and share less about me.
Mm.
Whereas in a business environment where I'm selling myself and who I am and my services as part of, that's what you're buying into,
Yeah.
I have to be authentic with who I am, vulnerable,
Mm.
share the good and the bad, as opposed to a constantly polished professional approach.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by comfortable. It feels, yeah, it's that vulnerability. It feels more vulnerable to share something about myself that is personal, or yeah, is not, it's just not my natural place to be.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It does. And but are you saying that you're pretty resolved that as part of your new business, you have to be out there, you have to have a presence?
Yeah, I have to be able to do that. So I'm working with a business coach. I've got a 5-month plan, and within that plan is sort of a social media strategy, which is great because it holds me accountable. It keeps me on a path. So it's more just about, I want to feel like I can do it without overthinking it
Yeah. Yeah.
and worrying about what people's perception of me might be.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Without overthinking, worrying
Mm,
about people's perception. Okay. Okay. So it
yeah.
sounds like you're already having some thoughts about this.
Mm,
If we go forward half an hour to the end of our conversation, more or less,
mm.
where do you want to be on this topic?
I would love to be able to have just articulated 2 things to say that I can do that keep me grounded and um, something I can revert to, call it a toolkit or something, and revert to around if I'm feeling uncomfortable about it, if I'm feeling a bit wobbly about it, just something about the bigger picture. The bigger picture here is, although I'm sharing about me, this isn't really about me.
Hmm.
So I know by the end of it, I just would want to feel like I've got 1 or 2 things that I can revert to if I'm in that space of just feeling uncomfortable.
Okay. So the end point today is about managing your discomfort with
Yes.
with the inevitability that you'll be posting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah.
And what's important about that for you to get to that place where you can manage your discomfort?
So I think there's 2 things. There's one is the practical side of, I want to have a successful business. I want to have a business that is reaching the right people. I want to have a business that is bringing an income in. That's the practical side. And then the sort of emotional side is I just want want to um, just sharing about me and myself is all that's all true and authentic. And because I've got that personal experience of having been a coachee, of coaching, having changed my perspective, changed my direction in life, all of that is true and real for me. And I just want to feel like I can do that without feeling like there's anything holding me back on that, because what's important about that is what's relatable.
Yes.
Um, yeah, That's probably what I mean about sometimes I just need to take a step back and see the bigger picture. Although I'm sharing about myself, feeling vulnerable, like really it's about being relatable to people
Yeah.
as opposed to people judging what I'm saying about me. They're probably just trying to see themselves in what I'm saying. It's probably a bit of something I've just thought I probably need to just think about that a bit more.
Okay. Just before it disappears, just encapsulate that thought you're just having.
So it's like being it's relatable. So where I'm feeling, if I think about it kind of in a linear way, I'm feeling discomfort about sharing. It feels a bit vulnerable, but really what I'm doing is sharing my journey to be authentic and relatable
Mm.
so that somebody can see themselves in me and what I'm saying. So that I think just what I guess I'm saying is that sort of takes the personal out of it a little bit. Um, I'm using myself almost as a case study example, maybe. Um, yeah, that's probably one of the things I need to think about is although I'm sharing about me, it's more me as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the words that are popping into my head are things like purpose and useful. So that there's something for the other
Yeah.
person. There's a reason that they're going to take something away from what you're sharing.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I need to remember that actually because I've got um there's some P words that have just started to become a bit of a theme for me. These are just things like purpose, productivity, things that have just naturally come to me. And actually, with what you say then about purpose, that's probably one of those things that I can hold on to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I mean, thank you for sharing all of that, and we're already getting into a lot of the detail. But before we get into the
Mm,
main stage, I just really want to check if we get to this place where you feel comfortable with the discomfort of the
mm,
sharing, and then you can share a bit more freely.
mm.
What do you think that will lead you to be able to do?
Um, I think what what I'd hope it would lead to is I have clients come to me that feel comfortable with being vulnerable themselves, with being a open book, with um, a kind of might be a wealth of different reasons, but people that come to me feeling like I'm somebody that they could share openly with, that
Hmm.
they could trust, that they're in a safe space because they're talking to somebody who might not have experienced exactly the same as them, but can relate to
Yes.
what they where they are.
Yes.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's something I'd not really thought through consciously. I think in terms of what my end, if if I'm continue to do that, what good looks like for me at the end.
So is
Yeah,
that something that either today or at another point you need to carry on thinking about what good looks
definitely.
like?
Yeah, yeah. And I think actually just saying that out loud to you, it's perspective for me. It's what's the bigger picture here.
Yes.
The day to day might feel a bit uncomfortable, but it's all part of a bigger picture. Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing all this, Naomi. And I'm mindful that we're already, well into a lot of some deep thinking and some deep reflection. But to be
Yeah.
clear, I think you're clear enough on what you want to achieve from today. Should we push into the main
Yes.
body of our
Yeah.
conversation now? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I can see lots of thoughts already bubbling up, and I wanted to know what have you already done? Like, what thinking have you already put in place about this?
So uh I guess knowing that I was going to have social media as a big part of my
Hmm.
business development and growth, I'd already started to think, how do I start to separate who I am as, Naomi, the kind of person that my husband, my son, my friends know, versus the person that is, a coach. And although obviously I'm still the same person, what my being with my husband and my son is going to be slightly different to how I might be with, in a professional environment. So I'd already started to think about what is it that how would I want to, um, what would my social media presence look like? What do I want that to say about me in terms of visually?
Mm,
And how does that align with what I'm saying?
yeah.
So that when I am sharing things about myself, I feel that there is a constant thread of integrity within that. I'm not spreading anything that isn't true about myself or where I am or where I've come from. So I'd started to think that about that before having a social media presence. So therefore, when I've started, I've been able to have a plan of what I want it to be. And then as I've started to share information about myself, I've just what I've tried to do is to remember that, I'm not, because it's a business account, it's not about me.
Mm,
I'm not being judged on me. It's a judgment on the kind of integrity of the business that I'm offering.
yeah.
So that kind of removes a bit of the personal away.
So,
Um,
so
yeah.
you've used that word integrity a couple of times, and
Yeah.
you talked about the constant thread of integrity about what
Yeah.
you're posting, but also the integrity of your business. So, should we flesh that out a bit more? Like,
Mm.
what is this? What do you mean by integrity, and what's important about that?
Yeah. So integrity is one of my core values, and I've sort of done a reflection on my values as I've thought about the business that I want to have. And integrity, as I've thought about it, I've realized that throughout my life, integrity is really important to me because it means that you are what you say you are. There's no false promises, there's no ill intention.
Mm.
And so uh, it's important to me because there's a credibility within that, there's a genuine authenticity within that. Um, and there's a safeness, I think, within that,
Yeah.
with what you say and what you do aligning.
Credibility, authenticity, and
Yeah,
safeness. I mean, these are really substantial words, aren't they?
yeah, yeah. But they're really important to me,
Mm.
and perhaps that's, part of why I worked in the health service for so long, because that was, all those things were present within it. It was all about, the greater good as opposed to, um, sort of someone else's bottom line. Um, and I think, you know, I've done the I've done the work in my career and in my, the education I've done to be credible.
Yeah.
And it's important to me because I just want to feel that I'm adding value. And for me, adding value means that what you're offering is not false,
Yeah.
falsehoods. It's real.
So is there a worry that the way that social media operates, that some of these really important values to you might be challenged or compromised or somehow, you know,
Mm.
you might not be able to achieve them somehow?
Do you know what? I hadn't thought about that, and that hasn't been something that has been a concern of mine. I think more so it's just making sure that um, I don't get drawn into that. Um, you know, I and I think what I've tried to remember so far is that, who I'm wanting to appeal to is someone like me.
Mm.
And so what are the things that I am drawn to on social media? What are the sorts of things that I'm interested in? And so then thinking about how I reflect that in what I share. So I haven't been so concerned about being questioned on that. It's just making sure that perhaps what I am then doing inadvertently is making sure that whatever I do share, I can absolutely say is true, to avoid that, although I
Yeah.
hadn't consciously thought about that as a thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that might be just my speculation from, I suppose, what I know about social media and the sort of the mixed messages that are out there. So sorry if it said like I was introducing something of my own thinking.
No, no, I think it's a fair question actually, because it's definitely worth thinking about for me, for thinking about post this.
So what does it look like? What does a social media set of postings look like with these really key words and these key values that you've got underpinning it?
So to start with, I have shared about who I am, and what my journey to this point has
Yeah,
been. I've shared what the business is, a bit about what coaching is and isn't, and I've been able to use all of my experience from being a coachee, from doing my coach training,
yeah,
to be able to feel like that's all credible and real.
mm,
So I've done that um, to give me a bit of a foundation, I guess, of what this is and what this isn't,
yeah,
and who I am. But the next stage for me is to share a bit more about that emotional side of myself,
yeah,
that is not just nice, glossy posts. It's the kind of real stuff,
yeah,
you know, who I am, what I sound like, what makes me tick, how have I got into coaching, why it's been so drastically um, important in my where I am now. Um, so yeah, that's what I've done so far.
mm.
And I'm just into the next bit now.
And how has it felt as a like you say as a quite a private person and as a self-disclosed introvert? How's it felt doing all of that already?
Well, do you know, some I've just made myself do it.
Yeah,
I have just, because the bigger picture here is this, I want this to be a successful venture. And so I have just done it. And part of me has quite enjoyed just putting stuff out there that I feel quite proud of.
yes,
Um, that is just uh, it's hard work. It's hard work behind the scenes, making stuff that is real
yes,
and uh, clear and simple.
yeah,
Um, so far, I felt okay about it, and actually quite proud,
yes,
because I've had this vision, and this vision is now a reality in the public domain.
yes,
And by sharing it for real, in reality, I almost hold myself accountable by kind of now keeping going,
yeah.
which actually is quite a nice thing. I hadn't thought about that. Um, yeah,
So
sort
your
of in
commitment,
competition with myself.
and how does that feel? How does that feel to know that you've like set the wheels in motion and that you want to have to keep going with it?
Really good, because having my own business has been a dream of mine for years.
Yeah,
It just hasn't been the right time.
yeah,
And so so it feels so fulfilling, to be honest, to be
mm,
able to be in a place where I'm actually doing it.
yeah,
And I saw a post on Instagram yesterday that was something about, like, if it doesn't feel uncomfortable, that isn't growth.
yeah,
And that's so true. It's not going to feel comfortable. And if it did feel comfortable, maybe
yeah,
it isn't right.
yes,
Um, so yeah, I just have felt like despite feeling the kind of uncomfortableness, I've also really enjoyed it,
yeah,
because it encapsulates so much more for me.
yeah,
It's everything else that having, your own independent business brings.
yes.
Yeah, bigger picture stuff.
Bigger picture. So this sounds quite significant for you. What's all this
Mm.
meaning for you?
Well, do you know, when I was thinking about this session, I was sort of feeling a little bit like like I'm just, I feel a little bit like it was all a bit, I was feeling a bit fatigued by social media, sort of. And actually, from having this conversation, it feels like I can remember, it's important to remember actually that the reasons for this,
Yes.
and that this is all part of a bigger thing. When you're down in the detail of doing the doing, I think that perspective gets lost. Or I certainly feel like for me, I can lose that perspective. Um, yeah. So actually, it's just remembering the good. Like it's such a great place to be, personally and
Yeah.
professionally. Um, yeah, I guess you just have to kind of cope with the discomfort as well. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that discomfort is growth.
Well, that's what your Instagram post said yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it did actually. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So true.
So, you want at the beginning, you said you wanted a couple of tools or strategies so that uh, you could cope if it felt uncomfortable.
Mm,
Is what you've just said one of them, remembering the bigger picture?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. I did a post yesterday about changing your perspective
Mm.
because I was sort of feeling a bit like overwhelmed with all the things, and actually that is really important for
Yeah.
me to just change my perspective and
Yeah.
see the big picture
Yes.
and not get bogged down in the minutiae.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
So would it help here to really articulate because you've used this language of the big picture? Would it be helpful
Mm.
just to be really clear if your son or your husband says what is the big picture? What would you say?
Yeah. I would say the big picture is a thriving business with clients that come to me because they see their own potential in that. And I have a financial income from doing that. That's the bigger picture for me,
Oh,
uh, like practically. And then for me myself, it's the it's the value of adding value to other people. That's important to me. Um, because I've had a lot of life experience, I guess. And I think to be able to give some of that back to other people, although coaching isn't, I'm not telling people, but it's more just offering my time and my expertise and I kind of get it. I can feel where they're
yes,
from. That
yes.
feels really important to me to give back, and therefore that will feel purposeful.
And there's that P word popping up again, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so you've talked about for you practically, but also you emotionally. And then what about that
Mm,
third bit? What about if a client says to you, like what's the bigger picture for me? How would you
mm.
explain the bigger picture for them?
It's an interesting one because I guess it depends on what's important to them. Um, but the bigger picture would be, I would imagine that most people would seek coaching because they are wanting something to change,
Yes.
no matter how big or small that is. And so the bigger picture is that that thing that they are wanting to work on
Yes.
will change if they want it to.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And how much do you think that your personal social media postings are gonna allude to that? It's gonna be somewhere bubbling away. Someone will read that and think, oh yeah, change is possible.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, something that I have just started to think about. Like I guess where I'm at is trying to just do quite a lot of self-reflection on those sorts of things for myself, and then how I might reiterate those in social media posts. So one of the things that I had thought about doing is I mean, without going into like loads of detail, but having had the experience of going through fertility treatment and having to get on a lot of trains and doing a lot of travel for that, the two things became quite difficult for me. Like I'd associate trains with not a very nice
Oh,
experience. And since ending that treatment process a year ago, I realized in the last few months that I can go on a train and I don't really have to pre-plan, I don't really have to overthink it. And so I was thinking maybe I should do a post about that, which is a vulnerable place for me to
Yeah.
be, but that's the reality of
Yeah.
how, and within all of that, what's changed is, I've got purpose again in my life,
Yeah.
as a result of having done all of the kind of coaching, training, and making the decision that I wanted to do around going into that professionally.
Mm.
So that's the sort of thing I've started to think maybe I need to think about that type of an approach.
And I mean, and thank you for sharing that. And that's tough,
Mm,
isn't it? Of course, that's tough.
mm.
And do you feel comfortable as all the ways you've described yourself, sharing something quite so vulnerable, in an environment where we can't control people's reactions? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think so because um yeah, I think so because I've realized over the years of doing that it's a bit of an unknown entity for people, but I'm not really talking about having experienced fertility treatment. It's more just about experiencing that emotional challenge and everything that that represented, and then having taken something else, said yes to something else, and that's resulted in something really good. It might not have been what I wanted originally, but it still resulted in something that I did want.
Yes.
So that sort of explaining that journey, I think I feel okay with that.
Okay. So the idea that people can use this very personal experience as an example, as a way of understanding change in their lives.
Yeah, like even though we all go through things where we feel like we're in the trenches,
Yeah.
like something, good can still come from
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Well, and this is, I can't help but saying, it's really moving when you say these things. Goodness me, I can imagine what a reader might
Yeah,
take, although we never know.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm mindful of our time together, and where we started was you really
Mm,
wanted to get into having having an approach that would keep you going when you have doubts
mm,
and worries about
mm,
carrying on social media postings of a personal nature. So
mm.
just let's finish off by a few things. Where are you at on that things to keep you going?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's been really helpful just having the space to share that and just think about that. So definitely changing my perspective. That is so important,
Mm.
is that remembering that if I'm feeling overwhelmed, just see the big picture.
Yeah,
And that feels like quite an easy thing for me to do because I don't have to do anything.
yeah,
It's like a mental reminder to myself
yes,
to do that.
yes,
Um, and I know at the start I sort of said maybe one or two things, but actually that feels like the key thing for me
yes,
is that um, and something that's incredibly achievable.
yeah,
And I'll say to, my husband or, if ever you think if I'm kind of sounding a little bit in the trenches with what I'm talking about, just say to me, just change your perspective.
yeah,
And that might be just remembering, it might just be changing my perspective physically, like moving away from the room I'm in,
yeah.
getting 5 minutes of fresh air, something like that. But just whatever it is, just change my perspective.
Okay. And does that feel like enough? Does that feel like enough to be able to
Yeah.
ground you in what you want to do?
Yeah. Because I think with changing your perspective, I could do that. I could do that consciously.
Okay.
I could, there's a number of different ways you could do that consciously. I could just say to myself, change your perspective. I could change my physical location.
Yeah.
I could change what I'm doing in
Yeah.
that moment. So yeah, it feels like although it's one thing, there's tangible different things I could do that would facilitate that.
Yes. Okay. And you've described several iterations of it. How are you going to monitor it? Like if you go forward, like let's say the next 2, 3, 4, 5 months, to see how effective this is for you, this approach.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I don't know how I would monitor it so much, but maybe what I need to do is have something visual. So where I would spend most of my working day, something visual that is there as a reminder. So I can see it as a kind of check to myself. Um, and I guess also just continuing to share social media will be a tangible outcome of just doing it, getting on with it.
Yes. Okay. So the progress and momentum, the use carrying on doing it, that
Yeah, yeah,
make a difference, fam. Okay. Well,
yeah.
if I can offer a question, not to answer now, but just to think over the weeks, is
Mm.
if you find, let's say, I don't know, 8 times out of 10 that you have one of these wobbles, this strategy works, and if maybe
Mm.
once or twice out of 10 it doesn't work, what do you need to do about that? Don't let's not answer that today, but just have that as a mulling over. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah, that's really helpful.
Okay. So
Yeah.
from talking all of this through,
Mm.
what has been your learning about yourself today?
What's been my learning? Um, I guess that although I probably think quite deeply about things and potentially overthink things,
Mm,
it's because I care. I care about what I do and what I say. Um, but also that all of the tools to make this happen are within me.
yeah,
I don't need something else to enable me to continue to feel comfortable with social media. It's all there. I just have to tap into it.
yes,
So I think that's what it feels quite empowering, knowing that you can be, whilst I might overthink, I can also be my own solution.
yes, yes. Okay. And just say a bit more about that word empowering.
Um, or just knowing that if there is a problem or something that I'm struggling with, like I have got a mechanism to be able to navigate that.
Yeah.
I'm not asked, I don't need anything of somebody else to try and fix that thing. I can do that myself.
Okay.
Um, and that feels quite empowering, knowing that you can be that solution for yourself as opposed to needing something else,
And it,
someone or something else to fix you.
is that important, that autonomy, that agency to do it yourself?
I think definitely.
Yeah.
I think definitely that because then there's a if I feel autonomous in it, it's then on my terms.
Yes.
Um, and then I'm more likely to do the thing that I feel uncomfortable with because it's on my terms.
Yeah. So does this feel like a good place to bring our conversation to a close?
Yeah, definitely. I feel a lot lighter actually having had this conversation. It's been really helpful.
Good. Oh, I'm really pleased, and I wanted to thank you because this you've worked hard in the conversation, but also you've clearly you've been quite vulnerable, haven't you, in talking about this is
Mm.
which is it's which is an issue that isn't for everyone, but I'm sure that the feelings behind it will resonate for many. So thank you, Naomi, and we can talk about this again, but really good luck, and I hope that this bit goes really well for you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
pleasure. Thanks.